My mantra as chief scientist of WA was do science, translate science and communicate science. Beautiful lady called Rosie Batty, who'd been through a terrible experience involving domestic violence. She said 2/3 of women go back to abusive situations because the partner controls the money, and without resources, how are you going to survive?
You were writing papers on your own. That was courage to stand the conscious absence of knowledge that the other people watching you never thought about that. But that's so powerful.
Somebody said to me, something about you're a leader. And I went, am I? To me, leadership is seeing something that needs doing and nobody else is doing it. And unless you do it, you're more annoyed with yourself if you don't do it than if you do it.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Lyn Beazley. How are you?
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Thank you for your time today, and I'm so honored and glad that we are having this conversation today.
So am I.
I have gone through your extreme, the long CV you have. And
I've been around a long time.
In terms of the accolades, it's a little long list of accolades, but I would want to go beyond the accolades and ask you to tell your story from a younger age and the idea of being curious and how has that developed in your growing life and who were your first teachers and all around that.
Happy to do that. Okay, so you can probably tell by my accent I'm not Australian. I'm British by origin.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a family who lived just outside London, in an area which actually I revisited very recently when I was in London, was socioeconomically challenged, is I think the modern way of saying things. An only child of parents who married, in those days, considered quite late in life. My mum was 42 when I was born, an only child. Dad was working... this was during the war, Second World War. Dad was working as a technician, putting the cables, the insulation around cables for going under the ocean, which was really important during the war for communications. And Mum was a housewife because she was the only daughter in the family and she'd looked after elderly parents and then elderly in-laws. That was the way it was in those days. I was lucky enough to crack a spot in the local grammar school. And that was one of the most important events in my life because at that point, if you passed this awful 11 plus exam, you went to the grammar school. If not, and you were a boy, you went to the technical college, but girls didn't go there. I'm sure they do now. You went to something called a secondary modern school. And the chances of thriving there. And I was initially told I'd failed the 11 plus exam. And only 3 days before school started, they squeezed me in to what I then realised was the you've only just made it class. But at the end of the first year, they resorted us and I got into the top class. So one of the things I care about most now is helping young people. One single exam could have pushed me in very different ways in life, and that was wrong. And I don't think you should go about education with these one-off episodes like that, which is much further down the track. I'll talk about my work with neurodiverse people. So I get into grammar school and I have a wonderful teacher of botany, Miss Kendall. And Miss Kendall took us on one expedition that I can remember, and we went to Charles Darwin's house. And now I think it's a very formal museum. But in those days, it was just like the house he lived in. And you could go into the front room and see his desk and all the things he'd been working on and the microscope slides there and his own microscope. And I said to the gentleman showing us round, he had a brown sort of lab coat on, I can remember, and he looked to me aged about 90, he was probably 30. And I said, could I look through his microscope? And he said, you can. I mean, I don't know why I had the courage to ask. Nobody else wanted to, but I did. And I looked at the slide, histology slide that was underneath, and it was actually an insectivorous plant. what I realise now, that was probably a plant from Western Australia, because the last part of the Beagle voyage around the world, he stopped in Albany. By then he was very homesick and the weather wasn't great, and he missed the great biodiversity we have here, which is a wonderful treasure for us. But he did collect some plants, and it's really carnivorous plant central of the world. So I think I looked at West Australian specimens there. And I got back on that bus and I said to myself, I want to be a biologist. So I did all the school exams. And in those days, if you wanted to go for Oxford or Cambridge University, you had to stay on an extra year at school. And that was a real challenge for my parents, because by then Dad had been sick and couldn't work. So we were really pushed for cash. I don't think you appreciate that as much when you're a child as you do later in life. But I can remember people coming to have morning tea with Mum, and they'd bring their own bottle of milk. Anyway, my parents supported me to say I could do an extra year at school. And the reason I wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge was because I'd seen the boat race. There's a race every year in Britain between Oxford and Cambridge. And I'd seen it on the TV. And as a young kid, I thought they were the only universities that existed. I didn't know there were lots of others. But by the time I'd worked out there were others, I just thought, my gosh, if I could get into one of those, that would change my life, because if I'd failed the 11 plus and I'd gone into a secondary modern, I'd probably have been working in the local, all the girls ended up in a fruit canning factory and then married off, and my life could have been so different. I'll never know. Anyway, I did my extra year at school, and I was invited up to Oxford for an interview. So I had no idea what to do. I had no mentors. I had no support. And Mum said, well, you better look really good. So we went to the local department store, and I made my own clothes then, and I did for a long time afterwards, including those for my kids. And I helped my grandchildren now learn how to make clothes. So I had a suit that I'd made myself, and I didn't have a hat. And I thought, well, you better wear a hat because everybody does. And looking back on it, my gosh, it was terrible. It was green with a feather sticking up, which was orange. It looked as if you were failing to get a part in a Robin Hood movie. And I go up to Oxford and I get off the train, and it's at the stage when everyone was wearing duffel coats. It was the first sort of grunge era. And there's me sticking out like a sore thumb. And I just went, I'm going to lose this hat. And when I got back and said to Mum, because it was really expensive, she said, where's the hat? And I went, I lost it, Mum. So I had an interview and they asked me some science things and I could do those. But then they asked me why I'd chosen Somerville College. And I chose it for the reason I told them, which was it was nearest the centre and it had a bus stop outside, which I thought could be very convenient. Little did I know it was the top science college for women. In those days, there were only 5 women's colleges at Oxford, and that was the prime one for science, and I had picked it. So I think maybe I got a vote for honesty on that one, and they must have been really aware that I had no mentors, no support, which is why I do so much mentoring now, because I think it is so important. But somehow I squeezed through. The first year at Oxford was a joint course between botanists, zoologists, foresters, agricultural scientists. It was a big group of us, which was terrific. And the end of that year, you had to choose what to do for the next 2 years. And I had qualified to do botany. But during that year, and in the first 6 weeks of the botany course, I realised that wasn't the right one for me. And there was a lecture, and at the end of it, I walked out and thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to keep doing botany. I love plants, but it was a very staid school. It was very taxonomically based. It didn't have exciting biochemistry, and it didn't have any ecology of plants and why they were where they were. It might have happened down the track. Maybe I didn't give them a long enough time. So I went to my tutor in my college and she suggested, well, try zoology. And from then on, I just knew I'd found my natural home. So I did the degree in zoology and that was super. There were 40 of us, 20 blokes and 20 ladies, which was unusual because Oxford had 10 times as many men as women at that stage. But it was so much better balanced. And you really got to know them and make friends. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I was back in Oxford for one of the closest friends I made there for her 80th birthday party and publishing her latest book, would you believe it? She's a world expert now on animal welfare. So it was really enriching time. You know, we had lots of excursions. For example, Oxford owns one of the biggest woods in the world, the best studied Whiteham Woods. We spent time there. We went to Wales to study coastlines. We go to quarries to look for fossils. It was just wonderful. And I didn't know what to do after my first degree. And I thought, well, if I can get a good enough degree, the government will pay. And that's why I'm a strong supporter of supporting people at university, because without those government fundings, I wouldn't have had my degree, I wouldn't have done my PhD. And I was going to go off to London to do a PhD on fossils, because I was really interested in fossils. And actually here, I now have a fossil named after me, but that story might come up later. So I was really thrilled about that. Anyway, I went to an evening lecture just before my final exams with my then boyfriend. He didn't last much longer as a boyfriend, but he got me, he said, look, this looks really interesting, why don't you come? And it was an amazing man from Edinburgh University. He was a doctor by training, a medical doctor, but he was doing research. And he said, some animals, such as fish and frogs, are very good at repairing their brains after injury, but humans aren't. And the whole ethos then was, you'll never fix up an injured brain, don't even try. But he said, well, if these other animals can do it, what's different about them? What molecules do they have? What environment do they have that allows nerves to regrow rather than just hit a huge barrier the way they do in us, for example, after, say, spinal cord injury? And I thought, well, I know a little bit about fish and frogs, and that sounded really interesting. So I changed completely, and I said, can I come and do a PhD? And one of the things I say to young people now is, one, find where your passion is. But two, if an opportunity like that opens up, be prepared to embrace it. And look for something I didn't realize then, but this was really cutting edge stuff. Because we were the first to actually describe an anatomical change that underlies plasticity in the brain. Neuroplasticity, it was really suddenly very trendy. Neuroscience didn't have a name then. You were either a biologist or a pharmacologist or a pathologist, all studying the brain. So I inadvertently became part of a really groundswell of important new breaking things. So I say to young people when I talk to them, look for those new things that are coming online and often pulling different disciplines together. Because that's what it was. It was pulling all the disciplines that worked on the nervous system into one spot. It could be a medico, a vet, it could be a whole range, you could be a psychologist. It was putting it all together. That's why neuroscience has been so powerful. But I didn't do it because of that. I did it because I just had a real interest in it. Do a PhD, meet my beautiful husband, now of 55 years standing as married, but he still says I'm on probation, so I better be careful. And he was just qualifying as a doctor at that point. That meant that unlike others who would have gone off and done a postdoctoral position, because I wanted to stay in research, at a university anywhere around the world, but traditionally it's different from where you've done your PhD. I wasn't in that position because Richard had to do several more years as a junior doctor to work up the scale. So I took a job as a research assistant. And that gave me a breathing space to work out what I really wanted to do with my life. And it was a very I think, insightful and beautiful professor for whom I was working, but it wasn't an area that was going to really excite me. But I was doing it, I was putting my heart into it. And then after about 6 or 9 months of that, I suddenly thought, I really, really want to do my own research. I want to carry on with what I'd done for my PhD. And so I went to him and said, if I can scrounge together some equipment, will you let me have a room that I can do my own research in? And I'll come in evenings and weekends. Because Richard was working all the hours that God made at that point. Junior doctors did then. He did 102 hours a week before he got overtime, and he still got overtime. So I started doing my own research. And what I was really lucky about is that these days, or almost always, you're part of a team. And the teams are getting bigger and bigger. In radio astronomy, there'll be a page of people, for example, in immunology, an awful lot. But I published papers with only my name on it because I was doing it on my own. And that, there couldn't have been anybody else. And because I was in this really exciting area, I then got my own grant from what was then the Science Research Council. So that was at an extraordinarily early stage of my career. But it was because I was in such an exciting area and I published on my own. So by then, Richard he's got his qualifications from the College of Physicians of Edinburgh and one from London and things thrown in. So he's ready for the next stage of becoming a consultant. He's a respiratory doctor by training. And we, at that point, by then we have one of our 3 daughters had already been born in Edinburgh. And we thought we want to see a bit of the world before we settle down. And we looked around and we thought, Richard had worked briefly in the US and knew that he didn't want to practice medicine there. I had worked in Canada between my first degree and my PhD just briefly and loved it. But we thought Australia might be the place to go. We knew nothing about it. I was offered a job at the Australian National University in Canberra, but there wasn't a tertiary medical school there at that point. And so Richard wanted to be in a tertiary teaching hospital because he did research as well as clinical practice. I was offered a job here at the University of Western Australia, just a 2-year research job. And bless him, Richard at that point said, I was harder to employ than him and that I should find a job first and he would then look and see if he could match it. I mean, this was mid-1970s. How many men would have had that approach then, let alone now, even? It was extraordinary.
And I was ordered to commend him and on that thought.
Well, I'm just always so grateful. But as it happened, he then got a job as a medico, but at the University of Western Australia. So we both had jobs here. So we turn up with our one daughter. And the next really lucky thing for me was, so I start off as just one person. And I get a letter from the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia inviting me to apply for a fellowship. And I am so naive that I think, well, if I get one, everybody else must have one. And I put it in the bin. And a few weeks later, I get this phone call from Canberra. And it said, you haven't applied. We've invited you to. And I went, you really meant it? Yes, I mean it. So, yeah, I got a career fellowship. And that meant that every 5 years, assuming I could write a grant that really came up to the mark, I would renew my salary and I could have the security to start building. And the University of Western Australia were very supportive from day one, I have to say. I was actually in the psychology department then, and the reason I was there was, as I said earlier, neuroscience didn't have a home at that point. If I'd gone to the US, there were departments of neuroscience, but Australia hadn't got that far yet. So there I am, building up a research team, and I get up to, I don't know, close to 30 people. I mean, it was really beginning to get quite big. I occupied the whole of the top floor, which had basically started off as almost a series of attic and storage rooms, but by the time we'd finished was all kitted out for us. And then in 1994, I thought, by then I had this really big research group, I don't want to have to rely on me writing a grant. Say that grant didn't get up and I no longer have my salary, but I have all these people who are working as part of the team I'm in.
Yeah.
And so I decided at that point that I really wanted to swap across to a uni appointment. And the Uni of WA, I was the first fast-track professor because they could see I had itchy feet. They could see that if they didn't look after me, I was going to have to relocate somewhere else because I built up this team. Someone should be supporting me. So, yes, that all happened. I became a professor, but not in the psychology department, much as I loved it there. At that stage, and it doesn't apply anymore, but you had to be a qualified professional psychologist to have a professorship. And, of course, I didn't. So then I moved to my natural home, which was to go back to the zoology base, and I moved to the zoology department. I moved the whole team. And we were successful in getting something called a program grant from the National Health and Medical Research Council. That went for 5 years and extended for another 5. The year we got it, we were the only one in the whole country to get a program grant. So I was very proud of our team. We had wonderful, wonderful people. I co-ran the lab with a beautiful lady, Professor Sarah Dunlop, and I had others there. I was just counting up the other day. I have 6 people who were in that group, and they're all that are professors now.
Wow.
How extraordinary is that?
Powerful.
So I just found the best people, and they found me, I guess. And so we kept doing research. I could talk about what we did. Recovery from brain damage was what we were looking at. We still don't know how to do it, but we're getting information. It's really important. We did get insights from studying those fish and frogs, but we're not absolutely there. Then I set up a second team because we didn't actually look at spinal cord injury. We looked at regrowth of the nerve. Just a bit of science for a moment. The retina that lines the back of the eye, the light-sensitive sheet, during development is an outpouching from the brain. So you've got a little bit of your brain on a stalk at the back of your eye. And the nerve that then joins that bit to the brain is called the optic nerve. And it finds very specific sites in the brain, connects up to all the visual centres, and I can see you, you can see me. In a fish and a frog, if you cut that nerve, and it's got nearly 1 million nerve fibres in it, they grow back from the cut edge, back into the brain, find the right part, connect up with it, and within a few months, the animal can see completely normally again.
Wow.
If that happens in us, you're blind for life. It was a very good model because you could look at all aspects. You could look at everything, and in the end we did, from the genes that were being turned on and off. We could look at the anatomy, the physiology, listen in with little electrodes, what was working, what wasn't. We could do behavioural studies too. Could it actually see? And the great thing was, because we only ever would interfere with one nerve, the other one was working perfectly. So the animals could see through the other one, and 5% of all humans only see through one eye, through amblyopia. So for me, it was an ethically much more acceptable model to work on. But because we were working on the visual system, I read a textbook that said that Australian marsupials could see only blue and green, which is the colour that all the mammals, the placental mammals, the ones that, you know, the baby grows large in the womb, all of those except the primates, which includes us. So your dog, your cat, your camel, your tiger, you know, you keep going, they only see green and blue. They've lost the genes to be able to see red or to see right through to ultraviolet. And I just thought, I can't believe Australian marsupials that live in this highly coloured world with very brilliantly coloured flowers. You've only got to go and see the bottle brushes and the gum trees, eucalypts now, in full array of colour. So I thought couldn't be true. And when I went back and looked at the literature, it was all based on very early studies where people would actually collect a specimen, put it in a vat of rum or something like that, some alcohol to preserve it, send it back to the old country, to Britain or around Europe or the States, and people would then look at the eye. and looked to see if there were cells that are very recognizable in our eyes, if you get a good specimen, that are the ones that see color. And because the specimens were in such poor condition, they couldn't actually see those. So they went, oh, they can't see color very well. And I went, okay, this has got in the literature. This has been there for decades and decades. Not sure it's right. Started a whole series of studies with beloved Australian marsupials, looked at quokkas, quendas, bandicoots. We looked at honey possums, kangaroos, you name it. And boy, they could see all the colours we see from red right through.
Okay.
And they can see ultraviolet that we can't. So they see colours we can't even see. So I then had this dual life of recovery from brain damage and looking at vision in Australian animals, even did seahorses, one of my favourite animals as well. Because, you know, if they see something to settle on, they will turn the colour of the thing they're settled on for camouflage. So I thought they were a very good one to look at. But they were all linked together because it was all part of the visual system. We also did a most wonderful set of studies with a beautiful professor that we met at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Professor John Newman. You should interview him. He's absolutely wonderful. He was the Senior Australian of the Year a few years ago. And he works on premature birth. And we did a lot of studies on that because at that point, one of the treatments for people at risk of preterm delivery was to give the mums courses of corticosteroids during pregnancy. And there was no definition of what was too much or not enough. Not enough, obviously, because what it does is it tunes up the lungs to function well when the baby's born. And if you get too much, we knew from animal studies that would interfere with brain development. So we did a huge set of studies on sheep, and we actually, within 2 years, changed clinical practice around the world in the way corticosteroids were administered. So that was really important to us. There were lots of animal studies as well, but ours was the one that they were watching very carefully around the world. And I was going to conferences where all the medical doctors were there actually hanging on our next results. And then they did 3 clinical studies around the world, and that nailed it. And then amazingly, one of my own daughters, way, way further down the track, went into premature labour and said to me, Mum, have they read all your papers? And I went, I'm sure they have. So I didn't know it would help the health of my own one of my beautiful granddaughters. So that was me until I'm getting to the stage where I've got an amazing lab. I've got brilliant people. They're doing amazing work. And should I be there occupying a spot formally when all these young people deserve jobs and positions? And then there was a job advertised, which I really, really thought I'd love a crack at, and that was to become the chief scientist of Western Australia. But did I go for it? Of course I didn't. Being a woman, and I'm sorry if it sounds gender specific, but a lot of us have to tick every box and then tick it all over again before we'll apply for a job. And I could do 9.5 of the things they wanted out of 10. So I didn't apply. Luckily, they phoned me up and said, come and have a conversation. And so that was a completely new thing for me. I had to learn how to work with industry, the community, although I'd been on lots of government committees. I'd worked with the state government a lot because I'd become a trustee of the museum and we were very close and worked with the government closely. But I was then doing, and of course, working with the state government, but also the federal government. And one of the very big things we did was negotiate the biggest science project on the planet when it's completed, and that's the radio telescopes, this square kilometre array up in the Murchison and in the Kuru Desert in South Africa. In fact, I was up at Baladi this week looking at the amazing array of telescopes there. The logistics of doing it are extraordinary, and Australia should be very proud of that. So I was chief scientist for 7 years. At that point, my husband said he was going to put a photo of me on the fridge door to remember what I looked like. And I went, right, always quit. I loved a quote from Sir Charles Court, one of the premiers of WA, who said, leave the party when you're having fun. So I stepped down from chief scientist. And ever since, I've been really busy I'm patron of lots of things. I'm helping setting up what will become a school for autistic young people here in WA. I'm on national committees. And so I'm just really blessed. I've got a wonderful family. I live, I think, in the best place in the world for me. And here I am, sort of talking to you about everything I've done.
Wow. Can I say what an amazing story from the first moment in the Charles Darwin's house. It's just such an amazing story. I'm just watching you and I'm not done. I was so intrigued to just listen to the story. Thank you for sharing that.
I hope I haven't talked for too long.
No, I think it's so... I think that's just and justified. I wanted to go back in that moment when you looked through the microscope.
Yeah.
Two things were there with you. One was curiosity and courage. And how these two words have shaped your thinking, the way you have taken, if you can give an example, the way you take on bigger projects, take on bigger things, two things, courage and curiosity.
Oh, curiosity, always, learn things every day. And I think if you've lost curiosity, that is so sad. No, extraordinary. I mean, I learned, for example, when I was at Baladi this week looking at the radio telescopes, there are probably more planets floating around in the universe, having been ejected from solar systems, than actually circle round suns, around stars. I couldn't believe that. I mean, I just thought that was an extraordinary fact. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I was just fascinated to hear it. So curiosity, absolutely. And interest, I mean, you've got the things I'm most interested in, I suppose. I've always been interested in animals and plants and the sky and science. But I mean, people are the biggest curiosity almost, aren't they, too? So that's really important. But I don't think I really saw it as courage, because I didn't realise. I think there are two sorts of leaders. I think there are leaders who stand out from the beginning. They've probably got the right genes, they've had the right environment, people have told them they're terrific, they can do it. And so, they're the ones who lead the hockey team, and they're the ones who are the, leader in their scout or guide group or whatever. I wasn't one of those. I wasn't at all. And once we had built up this big, for then it seemed large research group of about 30 people, and I was collaborating with people across the world, across the state, across the country. And somebody said to me, something about, you're a leader. And I went, am I? And then I thought about it and I said, well, to me, leadership is seeing something that needs doing and nobody else is doing it. And unless you do it, you're more annoyed with yourself if you don't do it than if you do it. And so you do it. But you get a great team around you. You get a group of people who are committed, have the right talent. But I always believe the good old Harvard Business School model of appoint for talent, train for skills, because you always need to learn new skills. I mean, I think, to be a biomedical researcher or a biological researcher, you have to have a basic understanding of everything, how it's put together, what pH is, what a protein is. But the specifics of it, you learn all the time because it's evolving all the time. So for me, I'd say I've been very lucky. I've had great teams. I've always been part of great teams. And I've just had the opportunities there that Australia has offered me to have this amazing life in academe, then in science policy, for the country, as well as for WA, and the place to bring up and be part of a beautiful family. I mean, how lucky is that? And I'm still going strong. So.
I want to come back on I think you are courageous in a way that you might not showcase that I'm the leader, I'm the head girl of the school, and but I think you're showcasing the courage by doing it.
That's exactly right. You have hit the nail on the head. You just do it. You just do it, and you find people around who want to do it with you.
And that first lab you had, and you were writing papers on your own. And that's leadership. When people have to go in a herd to write papers, we talked about immunologists, and there's so many names on the papers, but you were writing on your own.
I was, yeah.
And that was courage to stand out.
I never thought of that.
The conscious absence of knowledge that the other people watching you never thought about that. But that's so powerful.
I hadn't thought of that.
So freeing for so many.
No, it didn't. It just seemed a natural thing to do.
That's what
there's
is.
No point in doing the research and sitting there and just looking at it and nobody shared it. I mean, that's what's amazing. If you discover something and you're the first person to know it, I mean, generating data becomes very addictive, I have to tell you. All scientists will tell you that. Mm-hmm. You can't wait till the next discovery and something that... And you start a study. I always believe you design it as best you can, but then when you've designed it, unless something catastrophic happened, which never did to me, you stick to that. And then at an intermediate stage, you don't understand the results. It doesn't make sense. But you push through, and then there's like a light at the end of the tunnel, and you come through and you see that the data are there. You've checked everything. You've made sure all your equipment is working the way it should. You've counter-checked it by getting others to look at it. You've done your very best to cover all the possibilities. And then you see an answer, not always the answer you expected, and that's makes it extra powerful in a way, because nature tells you things that you don't even think to ask, because you have to keep your eye open to other things that are going on during the whole process. But that is just an extraordinary privilege to be able to do that. That's output when you publish that paper. It's not outcome. And this is what I've learned over the years. Those papers can sit there on a shelf and others will use them. But to be able to translate that for a better planet
into practice.
So my mantra as chief scientist of WA was do science, translate science, and communicate science. And unless you do all three, not each individual doing all three, but being aware that almost every discovery will have an application, if not immediately down the track. We have just a Nobel Prize winner in Australia this year. I don't know if you've been following the news. He's now 89 years old, Richard Robson. And he did studies at first that people said were crazy. He was building complexes of molecules which we now know can hold things like hydrogen that we could then transport around the world. So, he was doing that basic research, but he was always alert to the possibilities. And we need science communicators, particularly in this age where people are becoming less secure about science, that we need to be able to tell them. And we have, I think, a duty to do that. I mean, one of the things that my students would do would be, and my postdocs and all my team, when they had given a talk to a general audience, not to a scientific one, but a general one, they would say, this is how much, on average, each Australian taxpayer has contributed each year to the studies we do. So the ones on the marsupials, for example, which will have implications for example, if we have to do any, if a species gets close to extinction and we have to build up a colony of these animals and get going again. But it was also pride in knowing what our species could do and understand them better. That research would cost every Australian taxpayer on average 3 cents a year. And we would say to the audience, how comfortable are you with that? And they would all go, yes. And that's why I think it's terribly important that we share that message of the role of science used wisely, and that's the important bit, but to share that knowledge, because people have to be on board. Most of them were with COVID, and I think that showed the value of basic research and applied research, because people could then take all their knowledge and start developing vaccines quickly. But we also saw that group that were totally lacking of trust. And I don't blame them. We have to get the message across better, and we have to show that, because everything's risky in life. There's nothing that's certain. We know that.
Yeah.
Death and taxes, I guess people say. But scientists have to share that message, and they have to share it in a way that's completely understandable. I mean, my hero, of course, is Sir David Attenborough, and isn't he everybody's? Because he gets amazing messages across, and it sounds... The expression he used once was simple but not simplistic. And that's paying respect to your audience.
Wow.
And he's curious for life.
Very much. And I've watched so many documentaries with my little girl. The idea between you have a problem statement or a research you want to start with. So this is a problem you want to solve, and there is an apparent solution you might have.
Yeah.
So sometimes in that search for solution, you don't sit with the problem that long. So once you sit with the problem long enough, or understand the problem, identify the right things which challenge the problem, the solution becomes very apparent.
Yeah.
Whereas when you start with the solution in mind, and how do scientists and researchers and people who are trying to find solutions on problem work with that kind of a mindset?
I think it's a very good question. I think it's being alert to what nature tells you, which I hinted at earlier. So you design the experiment as best you can. But as you're doing it, you might spot something and you would think, right, I'm going to keep this study going, but I'm going to take that observation and turn that into another study. So you have a combination of thinking laterally, but also trying to solve the problem that you have identified in the first place. And so, for example, you might look down a microscope and you'd see a cell type you'd never seen before, or a structure that you didn't expect to be there. Or you're watching an animal and you see it doing a behavior you've never seen it do before. And you note that down. So you note everything as you go along. And then, because you've got it all documented, you can use those insights to move you to the next discovery, or the next study that is going to inform you. Because if you have too much tunnel vision, and you become too locked into a single problem, and I think that's one of the issues for scientists now, because if you become very good at something and you think that's the best thing to do because that's what you've been doing for a while, sometimes jumping and joining another team or getting other teams to join you, but they bring that diversity of background as well as different skill sets, so that, science these days, you want to use a synchrotron, going back to the study of fossils. If you want to look at what's inside a fossil and you don't want to cut it all up, you can use a synchrotron, and there's one in Melbourne that lets you, 36 hours of exposing it to all sorts of radiation, you can actually see the structure of the animal or plant that was inside that fossil. So you have to be aware of using equipment that's right for the job, and seeing other techniques that you can bring to bear. So, as I say, the studies we did on colour vision was everything from the genes right through to going to field sites and watching the animals in action. So, yeah, it's having a clear path, but having portholes all the way along to what nature's trying to tell you.
Plato, very
Does
right.
Does that make sense?
Very much. Plato very well said that. He says the virtue should come before rhetoric.
Ah, that's a very good quote. Thank you for that one.
And that's you have clearly explained through science.
Yeah,
with his quote.
But I think it applies to other things.
Yeah.
I mean, can I tell you about setting up something? So I was lucky enough to be the WA Australian of the Year in 2015. And I go to Canberra and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to win. And
as you always do.
As I always do, but for a very good reason, because I knew who needed to win.
Okay.
And that was a beautiful lady called Rosie Batty, who'd been through a terrible experience involving domestic violence. And that we needed Australia to focus on that. You know, one woman a week dies of a domestic violence situation. The kids can die too. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And I said to Rosie Batty, I'm a nerdy scientist from WA. What can I do to make a difference? And she said, 2/3 of women go back to abusive situations because the partner controls the money, and without resources, how are you going to survive? And if you could get more financial literacy into women, they might not do that. So I was lucky enough to get a group together, about 10 women and 2 blokes. 4 of us put $500 on the table to kick off. And from the beginning, we've been working, and they've been our absolute saviour in all of this, the Chartered Accountants of Oz, New Zealand. They gave us a little bit of an office, they gave us access to their facilities, and they gave us the confidence that we could hold meetings there and conduct our work from there. So we then raised $7,000 at a quiz night. We sent along our team and they came bottom, but that's fine, it didn't matter, because we didn't know. Most of the questions were for the last 20 years, and we weren't up to speed on things like home and away, IKEA, modern music. Didn't matter. We then got $20,000 from the Department of Women's Interests in WA. Now we have this wonderful thing called yourtoolkit.com. I'm just an ambassador for it. At the beginning, we were looking at financial abuse, but we realised domestic abuse is much wider than that. And we were doing workshops, but we were also setting up an online facility. And the workshops were great to start with, but we realised the people we needed to get to most were those who would never come to a workshop. The partner was going to ask where the hell they were going, what they were doing. And so we realised it had to be online. And that's what it is exclusively now. It's a unique facility, yourtoolkit.com. The chair of the board, wonderful Elisa Fear, and her team have just done an amazing job. I can't thank them enough. But now we're going national because so many people coming on our website were from the eastern states, and we need to share it across the country. And we've got international women, and I guess men come on the site too, but it is specifically aimed at women. It has an early stage where if you think there's something wrong, you can identify what it is and maybe put it right. But if not, if you know that you're going to have to leave, then get yourself your own bank account, get yourself a credit card, get a tax file number if you need it. Advice immediately before you leave an abusive situation. You know, how do you get the police in? What do you do with your dog so the dog isn't left behind, or your other pets? Where are you going to go? Help immediately after you've relocated, how to get the kids into a new school if you need to, and things like that, and long-term, how you can thrive. And I don't know how many lives we've saved, but I think a lot, and transformed many lives. So that was an idea, got a great group together, didn't exactly know what we were going to do. We scoped the whole thing for a year or so to pick on these 2 things. One of them was good for a while. The other one has thrived long term. So you don't always know exactly where you're going. But good, dedicated people with a range of skills, some IT. We had a lawyer who joined us. We had people from industry. We had those with lived experience. How important is that?
Yeah.
So, and always have had. So it was a wonderful project, and I'm super proud of it. I'm not going to be ashamed to say that. I am, because it's everybody. It's been a team effort. It's been a wonderful effort, but it's going to have a wonderful legacy. It's going to continue to help women here and around the world. And that was one conversation, and then getting together with a wonderful group.
Wow.
How lucky am I that well, it was, it's the way I do things.
As you, what do you call it? I think the problem bothers you initially, what I'm saying? A problem or an idea bothers you, and then you start looking at it.
That's right. And you think, who else is doing it? And if nobody else is doing it, well, do it. give it a shot. But find the right people, do your homework, get it together, and make it work.
And can I say that skill set of bringing people together, it's very difficult. People can try, but getting the right people into the room is very important. And then getting know the right people or have the intent. And when people come together, people might not, everybody has their own personal opinion.
Of course.
Why they want to come and join this group.
Yes.
But if there is a clear intent and an outcome,
yes,
and somebody who's putting the ground, the initial bricks on the ground, they are firm and they have strong values, I think people come along.
Absolutely. Good people find good people. And people might not be with you for the entire journey. They might be able to help you at a particular point. And you'd be able to say to them, because I've often asked really busy people, and I've said, if you can help us for 6 months and we get to this stage, please, we will treasure you forever, but don't feel it's a longer term commitment. And often people can do that rather than thinking, my gosh, I'm on this board for N years and I'll never get away. So people quite often, when I approach them, will say, oh, Lyn, I'm too busy. But then I explain what it is and why, and how even a brief commitment from them would make all the difference. And sometimes it is a brief commitment, but sometimes it turns into something that goes on for a hell of a long time, And so I don't in any way direct the yourtoolkit.com now. I'm an ambassador for them and I work with them. And in fact, we're doing an amazing study right now. We have an app on coercive control. We probably have the best data in the country on understanding coercive control. And bless them, the Pawsey Centre, one of the largest supercomputers in the Southern Hemisphere at least, has a little pro bono section and they're analysing the data for us. And we'll share that with governments and we'll publish it. I always believe in publishing things as reports or preferably as peer-reviewed journal articles, because then you have credibility and you have your peers knowing about you. But this will be an example where the coercive control work we're doing will not just be papers in journals, it will be, but it will be working with government to look, hopefully, at how we tackle this really key issue in the whole world of domestic and financial abuse.
Because you have delved into a lot of work within the domestic violence space, in terms of the way the mind works, the psychology of humans, have you seen any insight or trends from that point of view that, why there is a recurring abuse or why there are some people who are more prone to abuse?
Well, I think it's well known that if you have suffered abuse as a kid, you get those, you see it as norm. Your role models are completely, inappropriate sometimes. But the human brain, we still have the same cells we're born with. Any other part of your body, the skin, the liver, the lungs, the heart, you name it, muscles, those cells have a lifetime and then they're lost and new ones replace them. But the brain isn't like that. We've got the same cells with a few minor exceptions that we were born with. It's just how complicated they are, which connections are reinforced, which pathways really zing and which are suppressed. You get, during the time of greatest change in the human brain is probably up to about the age of 7. And the cortex, the thinking part of the brain, isn't fully mature till about 25 years old, but it still is tweaked all through life. That's what, that's how we learn new things and how we evolve. But those early years are so crucial. So if you're experiencing trauma there and you're getting inappropriate role models, then that's going to make life very difficult for you. And if you're born with particular gene combinations that predispose you to have your brain working maybe a bit differently from others, and that's why I work in the autism area so much now, that these are extraordinary people. No two brains on the planet are identical, just like our fingerprints aren't. Everyone's different, but that diversity is really, really important. But particularly working with young people, we used to call it a critical period of development, and that varies for different sensory systems, for example. But, that's when you can have a really major impact in the shortest possible time. And that's why sometimes putting things right can take longer, because the brain can change, but it doesn't change quite as quickly as it does when you're younger sometimes. So yeah, that's, I'm sure that's all built into this whole thing about domestic and financial abuse, and the whole thing about neurodiversity and the like.
And your more recent work in the neurodiverse space, how that came about in terms of what was the problem you were grappling with?
Okay.
What triggered you, or what were you grappling with?
Oh, okay. So
the story of Genesis.
I'm chief scientist of WA, and one of the things I really wanted to do, and still do, is to get more young people getting an education, because that's what saved my life. And because I'm a scientist by background, getting more young people interested in science, technology, arts and maths, STEAM we call it, for me was very important. I visited lots of schools. I'm patron of the Science Teachers of Western Australia. I'm also national patron of science lab technicians in schools, and of the local group here for Independent Schools LabNet West. I'm very proud of being part of those organisations. So to get that education, because I knew how important those early years of school were and had been for me. So I would visit a school, and I'd often see a young kid that didn't seem to fit in with everybody else. And they'd often come up to me and talk to me about science if they were brave enough. I didn't know who they were or what they were, but I could identify that they had that curiosity, that interest that you talked about earlier. Then in 2016, I was invited to have a coffee at the Art Gallery of WA, which I love, by a wonderful group based at Curtin University, led by Professor Telly Tan, AM. He's now, and his Australian honour was for work with the autistic community as well as his engineering work. So this is a wonderful example of taking a skill set and applying it more widely. So Telly is an engineer. He's got a PhD from, I think, Surrey University in Britain. And he came to Curtin University as an engineer, and he still works teaching and researching engineering. But one day he was asked to help with a study of eye movements in autistic young people. And they just needed someone to tune up the equipment to make it work better. That triggered Telly's interest in autism. From there has grown, and working with a wonderful team, most particularly Professor Sonia Girdler at Curtin Uni. And then they were successful in getting a very big grant from the government, federal government, along with what is now the Kids Institute, used to be Telethon, with an amazing, wonderful man, Professor Andrew Whitehouse. And there was also a team at University of Queensland looking at autism. As well as doing all the theory and designing practical ways of helping particularly young people with autism, what they would do was they started mentoring young people in schools who were autistic. They would help them through university, because the stats say 1 in 30 kids at the moment are autistic, and the numbers are going up. So that means there's 1 in every classroom on average. 1 in 2 don't complete high school. That is not a proud statistic for us.
No.
If they get to uni, 1 in 2 drop out during that. So this small program, it felt big at the time, but through the Autism Academy at Curtin Uni, mentoring through school. Kids didn't have to do an ATAR anymore to get to university or TAFE, and I was thrilled about that, because that 11 plus message was still in my mind. We could get a portfolio for the young people to get entry into TAFE or uni without doing the standard exams. They could show their talents, strength-based is what we call it. Then we would work with them through uni and into a job. And we have nearly 200 of those graduates through that program working in really productive jobs. They're working along the terrace, BHP, Rio, Woodside, Deloitte, Department of Transport, Bank West was a huge supporter from the beginning. So these are really talented young people who otherwise could well have dropped through the net, doing invaluable research. Work. It is research, actually, in a way, because they are working in these companies, particularly in the IT area. Cybersecurity is hugely important. Designing new ways for the resources sector, for the banking world and others to function better for a better planet. So I saw all that, and I was an ambassador for it, and I was very proud of it. But it continues to this day, and long may it flourish. But we needed to take it a step further. And it was for those kids who were dropping out of school. So we have now set up, and I wasn't sure I wanted it called the Lyn Beazley Academy, but I think you need somebody's name on it, and I'm proud it's me. We decided that we needed to set up something particularly for high school kids who were dropping out of standard school. I don't blame the teachers. It's the hardest job in the world. Teachers work really hard, but it's very difficult to accommodate the range of students you have in your class. And if that works perfectly, and I'm all for inclusion when we get there, but the bottom line is we're not there yet. Kids are dropping out, they're being homeschooled, they're being lost. So we have set up the Lyn Beazley Academy. We're not registered as a school yet. We're going through that process at the moment. We have homeschool kids who've started with us already, the most wonderful young people. It's going brilliantly well. We're very, very excited about it. And our vision is, again, working with wonderful people. This only happened because we could put a business lens over the whole thing we've been doing. And a wonderful man, John Grahovaz, who was previously a partner at Deloitte, he and I got together to start building this. And wonderful people have come on board. We have an amazing board. We have the most extraordinary staff. The parents are amazingly supportive. And actually, if you go into Yagan Square in the middle of Perth, you know, there's that big tower.
You're right.
7 of our young people have made videos that are up there in the Mental Health Week to explain how different brains work differently and how we can treasure all of them and make a difference. So that was, again, seeing a need, seeing an opportunity. Who else was going to do it if I didn't step up, but I didn't know how to? A coffee conversation with John said, we can do this. And that's how far we've come so far.
Wow.
How exciting is that?
Very much.
I'm so, and we can replicate this model because there are so many young people who can benefit from this. And then as we understand more about how to work with neurodivergent people, then the more we can be totally inclusive. And that's what the model we all want, is just how you get there. Does that make sense?
Very much. At the initial stage, when you were talking to corporates to employ people with neurodiverse skills or neurodiversity, what was the initial reaction you would be getting? And what were the initial hiccups, or what was the bridge to be crossed? Okay,
that's a really great question again. I think there was an awareness, but it's much better now. So, for example, the first 2 young people that we got into Deloitte, we had a program through Curtin University, I think it must be an app now, that would help and tutoring for our young people to know how to work when they got there. But we also worked with the companies because they have to make certain adjustments. It's a 2-way adjustment process to make it work. And if you want that to happen, then it does happen. And in fact, it makes a much richer workforce because people feel they're doing the right thing and the company's benefiting. And these people that otherwise might have been lost, sitting at home, miserable, sad, an impost. You've only got to do the economics of it, actually, and look and see how much money you're saving, the health system, the social security system, even the justice system in some cases. It's a no-brainer financially, but it's the right thing to do as well. Now, Deloitte have a national policy of at least 15% of their workforce have to be neurodiverse, and they're looking to increase that. So the awareness of not only doing the right thing, but knowing how it benefits their company, because a whole load of their clients are neurodiverse. And often a neurodiverse employee will work with the neurodiverse clients even better than they could.
May I ask, in the natural population, what's the percentage of people who will have neurodiversity?
I can give it to you for autism, but I can't give it for the others. But at the moment, for in Australia, each census, it's going up the number of autistic. But at the moment, it's something around about, for young people, probably about 1 in 30 are recognised at the moment. The numbers are a bit lower for adults because so many have yet to be tested. But at the very conservative, about 1 in 100, which is a lot. And as the number of older people, I talked to somebody the other day who's just had their son diagnosed as autistic, and the psychiatrist said to the dad, well, I think you might be on the spectrum too. So they tested him, and Dad said, this explains a lot of my behaviour. I'm so happy to know that. It's often very enlightening and supportive to have a diagnosis when you've wondered why you didn't quite fit in on certain things and what's been hard for you when it's been easier for others. So that awareness, but these are the sort of numbers we're talking about. But this is just one aspect of neurodiversity. There are so many others, and often it's not just one. Till a few years ago, you could either be diagnosed as autistic or another neurodiversity. But now it's appreciated you could be more than one. I mean, just the way you could be asthmatic and be diabetic. There's no reason that you're only going to be one.
Wow. From a leadership point of view, you have picked up so many projects and then made them bigger and then handed over and then became patron and ambassadors of those organizations.
That's it. That's the model.
That's the model. But how might we encourage more people? Because there are not too many people have that skills of bringing people together. There are only a few and not that many in the world. How might we encourage that model of being curious, getting the right people, doing the right research, and building a business up or a commercial entity which can financially support itself and then do good and eventually move out and hand over?
Well, that all comes to networks, doesn't it? You have to have supportive networks. Let me tell you about one. I'm actually proud to be patron, and this is the largest network for women in Western Australia, Women in Technology WA. It started as a group from the oil and gas industry. They would meet in a cafe for breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. Now it has grown, and because everybody uses technology, you don't have to be a science technology engineer or a mathematician to be in it. We've all got a mobile phone. We all drive cars that have got all sorts of GPS and God heaven knows what in them. So, it really is for all women who want to be aware. So, for example, you often found in the past that people would say, well, I can't find a woman for this job, or I can't find a woman for the particular board. Now we have bios of well over 200 individuals. And I can say, go on there and have a look and see who you can find. Because the women are there. It's just often they haven't, sometimes for career interruption stages, sometimes because they're diffident like me, where they wouldn't have applied for a job. It's seeing those opportunities. So find yourself like-minded people who like what you like. I mean, I'm co-patron of the Naturalist Club, and you can see why, because I love it. I'm patron of the Science Teachers Association because I so believe in teachers and everything they do. I think it's the toughest but most important profession on the planet, without no question to me, because it's looking at the new generation and bringing them through. So it's having the courage to go out and meet people. I'm not very good at that. I would always hover back in a group. But if I find a group that's interested in the same things I'm interested in, then I'm fine. And so it's sort of sticking yourself out there a bit and taking opportunities and finding the groups you want to be part of. And again, you might not want to lead it, but you would want to be part of it. I was really lucky just over year and a half ago now, one of the unis here, one of the universities asked me to give the graduation speech to the graduating students. And I gave them the Lyn Beazley Pillow Test. And the pillow test is when your head hits the pillow at night, that you will have done something to help make the world a better place. Because if you have the opportunity, you have the responsibility. It might be within your family. It might be kindness and support to a stranger. It might be local, national, or global. But if you can tick the box on at least one of those, more days than not, one, you're going to feel better when your head hits the pillow. But two, you will help make the world a better place. So coming and doing this podcast with you today, you see, I can hit the pillow and go, yay, I've done that. So there's always opportunities. And they will be at that different scale at different times of your life.
I would love to share that test with my friends, the Lyn Beazley Pillow Test.
Well, it's easy, isn't it?
It's easy.
You see, by doing these podcasts, you're doing the same thing.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that I'm hearing your stories and so powerful. I want to go back. Today, there are opportunities from, Women in Technology WA and then the job roles available, and people are more courageous in terms of what you said, that you were applying for chief scientist. You said 9.5 out of 10.
Roughly. I know. How silly was that?
Going back to Oxford, back in that days, you had equal distribution in your batch, 20 men, 20 women. Very interesting back then. Can you tell me why was there a disparity in that cohort, whereas everywhere there were more probably more male dominated?
Okay. So the reason it was 10-1 at that stage was there were only 5 women's colleges and there were 20 or so men's colleges. And on the whole, the women's colleges, they didn't have the history, they didn't have the financial support from way back in the Middle Ages or whatever, so they tended to be smaller. So that's why it was 10-1 over the whole uni. Why it was 1-1 for us is that I think biological sciences, women particularly like it. I think women are interested in natural things to an extent. At that point, very few people did engineering. Women did engineering, for example. There were subjects that were seen as much more male-dominated. And so ours was one of the disciplines that was particularly, I think, user-friendly to women because they had a natural interest in it. And I think another sort of aspect of it is that it's at school. I mean, I went to a all-girls school, and I know some schools are, separate schools, and some are co-ed. But I think in schools the subjects you could do, the range you could do, that girls often were steered down certain paths, but the biological stuff was one of the ones that thrived. And so that's, I think, underlies that much more even balance. But it made it so much better. I mean, socially much more acceptable and natural. And so it was lovely. And in fact, 2 people in our year got married and had a baby. And I look back on it and see how enlightened the staff were, because they continued. They both finished their degrees. Some days they come in with the baby and the pusher. I mean, for the 1960s, how enlightened was that?
Very much. Because your career has evolved in so many dimensions, were you seeking mentors when you were moving further?
That's a great question. I wouldn't have even known what a mentor was officially. But you gravitate to people who you think can help you. And one of the things I say is, if it's a good idea and you truly believe in it, ask. They can only say no, but they probably won't. They'll say yes if they can. And if not, they might say, well, talk to somebody else who can help you. So if it's frivolous and you're not going to put your back into it, don't ask. But if you're seriously going to want to make this work, then please get your arguments together, explain why, but then ask. Whether it's to run a team, whether it's to join a group, whether it's to chair a board, whatever it is. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier, between my first degree and my PhD, I went to work at McGill University in Montreal. So I've been offered this research assistant's job for 3 months, and I need the equivalent of about $500, £50 it was in those days, to get the cheapest possible airfare there and back. Because once I get there, I'm going to be paid. And I don't have the money. So I went to the principal of Somerville College, a wonderful lady called Dame Janet Vaughan. She was the one actually who chaired the committee that in Britain decided that blood donations would be free. And that's adopted through so many parts of the world now and saved so many lives. So she was a true leader. Anyway, I go along to Dame Janet and I'm very nervous about it. And I say, could the college lend me £50 because I don't have it, but I will be able to pay it back at the end of the summer when I've had this job. And Dame Janet, because it was all very formal in those, she said, Miss Beazley, oh God, this is it, I've had it. We do not make loans, but there is a travel fund that you could apply for, and I have every confidence that you will be successful. And I got that £50. So I had good arguments when I got there because I knew I was going to go and do a PhD. This was going to give me experience in a new area. This was going to be something that, you know, I could extend my networks. I had the arguments ready. And so, you know, it's then going and asking and going back to setting up yourtoolkit.com. We got all the arguments together and we went to the minister, Simone McGurk, and asked for $20,000 to start the program. And, you know, we got all the supporters on board. We got all the arguments first. So don't be scared to ask. And if somebody asks me to do something now and I can't, if it, you know, there's a conflict in my diary or it's just way beyond my skill set, I'll say, no, but have you thought about someone else? And it's the same with the Lyn Beazley Academy. If a parent phones up and their young person is too young for us or not the right fit for us because we have to make sure they succeed because they've had so many obstacles in their young lives already. But we always have alternatives because the last thing we want that parent to put the phone down and feel, no, I've just been rejected. We want them to know other opportunities. And that's why we've set up a parent support group and they meet, they have morning tea once a month. And they are now not only being able to talk to each other and share ideas and feel they're not the only ones on the planet with these issues, but it's also giving them access to all sorts of support networks they would never have heard of before. So get your arguments together, but don't be afraid to ask. And I think you need not only a mentor, I think you need 3 things. I think you need a mentor, and that mentor preferably should not be close to you in what you do. So when I was chief scientist, I likened things to 4 legs on a table. Industry, government, academe, and that's kindergarten through to uni of the 3rd age, and community. And just like a table is stable with 3 or 4 legs, but not with 2, you need at least 3 of those to make things work. So I recommend finding a mentor from one of the other legs on the table. But you need an advocate from your leg. And they're going to be the person in your university, in your company, in your group, who will say, Frida could do that job. She'd be really good at it. Why don't you think of her? Or why not, you know, introduce this new thing that's been suggested by Sarah? And because women, I think, often hold back more than men. I think it's a natural diffidence we have. We've got to get it all right before we're going to ask for anything. And also, if things start going wrong, and hopefully they won't, but if they do, that advocate has got to be there standing up for you. And if the worst happens, you have to go and find another job, find a new position, they can help you do it. But the third thing I think you need is financial advice. And luckily, I've got a wonderful husband who does all that at the moment, and I'm learning it now, belatedly, and I'm glad I am. But women have to have that degree of financial know-how to look after themselves. Women have 45% less superann than men. We still have a salary gap in Western Australia of around about 20-odd%. It's coming down. It's about 7%, I think, in Victoria. We're way above the national average. And there are some reasons for that because of the distribution of our jobs are different from the eastern states, but that's still not acceptable. So having a bit of financial know-how, I think, can go a long way. Not that it's not because I think people want to be rich, but women in particular need to know they have that financial security if things get tough ever, and be able to stand on their own feet, and put food on the table and look after the kids. Does that make sense?
Very much. Do we have brain cells can you work on the brain cells or train them to be good leaders?
Good leaders?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're all learning all the time. I think that's a really interesting question because it's a bit like saying, what are the genes for, say, autism? And some things are very simple. You can see red light because you have one particular gene. We can go into our DNA and say, oh, it's there or it's not there. And that's the way we sometimes identify criminals or find people who have been wrongly imprisoned and shouldn't be there because that one gene is going to tell you about it. But most things are constellations of genes working together. And the brain is like that too. So leadership, I don't think, takes the same form necessarily in every person. There'll be different combinations of nerve cell working and networks will change. But I'm sure if you have, the model I've developed of get great people together, work with them, get it set up, monitor it, keep a watchful eye on it, be part of it, to step in and be helpful, that's something that I've evolved through just experience. And that goes back to my PhD, which was neuroplasticity. And the brain is always changing. It's modifying. You'll be a bit different after this interview, so will I, and people watching and listening than they were before. Because the brain is such a dynamic and fascinating place. So you won't find, I believe, if you could ever get leaders and non-leaders and stick them in some CT machine and look and see if their brains are different, I don't think you'll find it as simple as that. It really is a constellation of neural pathways. And going back to the issue about young people, if you've grown up in an environment where you're scared, where you're traumatized, that will have set up pathways that were reinforced that you have to work heck of a hard to down-regulate and up-regulate the others. So I don't think there'll ever be a genetic basis simply for find a gene and there's a leader, because the paths that people take are so different and the opportunities they have are so different. But my basic philosophy is you have to line up what I call the head, heart, gut axis. Your head has to work out all the logistics of what you want to do. Your heart has to pump faster when you think about it because you want to do it. And the most important one, I believe, is your gut. Your gut evolved a nervous system of its own before we had any complex brains. And what I mean by that is the Aboriginal people will call it their spirit. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. Don't take a job that you think is brilliant because I'll get this salary and I can do it, so my head's involved. My heart is there, but my gut thinks I don't really like the people around, or I don't think it's what I should be doing. And if you think that on day one, by 6 months in, you'll really hate it.
In conclusion, people who are given the gift of, one is intellect, the network, people around them, people who have mentored them, and they have those skill sets and tools and people around them. What's your concluding message for those people who can make a difference?
First of all, thank you to them for doing that, because the world needs good people, and I think almost everyone is innately good and wants to contribute and make a difference. So go for it. Find the right people around you. You have to have a supportive family, tolerant and enthusiastic to support you. They might have different skill sets. They might do different things, but we don't want us all looking the same. Diversity is really important on this planet because we all benefit from that. So go for it, do it, make the most of your life, and you won't get a second chance. If there are opportunities, take them. If there are challenges but you think you can do them, give it a go. Get the support right, get your arguments ready to go, but don't back off doing it, because every single person on the planet can make a difference. And I heard the most beautiful quote from a wonderful lady down in Narrogin at the senior high school there. I think she had some formal title of sort of, diversity liaison officer or something. Beautiful Aboriginal lady who was granny to everybody after school, particularly those who needed help and support. And she said, it's not how smart you are, it's how you're smart. Because every single person on the planet has skills and smart that we can help make a better place. And so see what you're good at, see where your passion is. And if you have the benefit of good health, and exercise is really important. The only part of our brain that makes new cells, or one of the only two that makes new cells throughout life, is the hippocampus that deals with short-term memory. And we're pretty sure that exercise and using a brain a lot helps them make even more cells. So also, don't be a lounge lizard. Get yourself active. That's really, really important. But take the opportunities and then try and celebrate your successes, because when you're busy doing things, you sometimes don't step back and say, hey, this is what we've achieved. But celebrate your successes as well and fight through. Not everything will work out every day. I mean, everybody's going to have a lousy day sometime, and accept that. And I know when I've had a lousy day, because I go straight round to the local supermarket and buy myself not even a tin, but a tube of condensed milk, my favourite thing on the planet. Because if it's in a tube, you can actually just go squirt. And that's it. And then, regroup, and then know that not every day is going to be perfect, but celebrate the perfect ones and try and make your day as good for you and for everybody else as you can. I guess
thank you so
would be my message.
Thank you for your time, and I will for sure try a tube of condensed milk. And I will tell my friends to start working on, and remind myself to do the Lyn Beazley Pillow Test.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, because you have passed the pillow test today too. So thank you so much, Dev. It's been a joy and a pleasure to talk. I'm sorry I've talked for so long, but you kept asking me fascinating questions.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.